Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4 of the Weekly Poro Report, your one-stop shop for all things Legends of Runeterra. I am Smithel, and as always, I'm accompanied by my co-host Cozer. Cozer, you want to say hi?
What's up, guys?
Also, forgive any coughing. We are both kind of getting over a little bit of a cold,
All
but
three
we're
of
gonna
us, actually.
hold it together. Yeah, three of us. So
All three.
let's jump to this. Obviously, if you guys are watching the video version of this on YouTube or on what's it called, Twitch right now, you will notice there is a third face here today. So we are joined by special guest Krab Kore. First, anything too before we go into Krab, who you are and everything. First, big congratulations on getting partnered with YouTube. I know that's a heck of an accomplishment.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a year and a half coming, so finally made it.
Yeah, I know, that's a lot of work. Like you said, a year and a half, and how often were you putting out videos?
So, initially when I started out, I was about 1 to 2 videos per week, and then honestly had to spend the better part of 2019 going through just working on a lot of emotional health and getting better. So, started gearing up toward the end of 2019, and right here at the start of 2020, here we are.
Well, hey, congrats again. And now, too, I don't want to jump the gun about what you do and everything like that because, Koza and I are familiar. I know anybody that's been on the Legends of Runeterra subreddit within the past couple weeks definitely know who you are. I know you made a post there, which we're going to be talking about, that kind of exploded and became the Expedition Bible. But, for folks that maybe don't know anything about who you are, what you do, can you give us a little bit of a background information?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a specific card game content creator on YouTube, and I started out initially doing Magic the Gathering content, which was basically my introduction into card games, and had a passion to do a channel around that. And then once I got into the preview patches of Legends of Runeterra the end of last year, fell in love with the game and just knew that that was going to be what I wanted to do going forward. So really, really excited about that. And if you check out my channel, it's going to tell you two things. I want to help you rock at card games and rock at life. So, it's funny. I can tell who I'm going to be really good friends with when they get the reference before I tell them about it. But there is back in 2009, 2010, a really popular genre of music was screamo metalcore stuff. Bands like Attack Attack, whenever they would have really big breakdowns and stuff in their song, or they'd be rocking out, they'd get in this crab stance and go back and forth, and people started memeing it, calling it Krab Kore. And honestly, the music puts me in a good mood, and I wanted my name to kind of have that memey fun stuff that put me in a good mood. And winning at card games puts me in a good mood, so I wanted to make a channel around that, and that's where the name comes from.
That's pretty awesome. So you sit there and talk a little bit about being in the music and things like that, but what brought you to Legends of Runeterra, or even gaming in general? Where did you get your start? Have you been a lifelong gamer?
Yeah. So funny thing is, I'll start with this. I have never been a gamer my whole life. I grew up with 2 older brothers, and we mostly had the 2-player consoles. So whenever you're the youngest, you kind of just sit there and wait. And you kind of watch it. So I was not actually a gamer for most of my life. I was really into books and music. I was a drummer. So but when I went to college, I studied religious cultural studies, and I was a youth mentor during my time in college as well, and started noticing all these teens playing this game called Magic the Gathering. And the funny thing is, my brother started playing it too, and he said, "Hey, you should check out this game called Magic the Gathering." And so I did, because I wanted to know a little bit more about what these teens were playing, and started learning from them, and went to my first pre-release. So if you're not familiar with Magic the Gathering, when a new set comes out, you go to the store, you open up a bunch of packs, and you just play right there. It's a very limited format.
Yeah.
And I got freaking dominated, tail tucked between my legs. Just had to walk out of there with shame. But instead of discouraging me from playing it, it just set this fire in me. I have got to learn how to play this dang game and had a blast. So I started listening to podcasts. I started watching videos on how to draft and play sealed and get better at Magic, and just really fell in love with card games. And basically, that was 2013. So for 7 years, I've just been in love with all things card games and limited formats and all that stuff. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I definitely tried to when I was a kid get into Magic, but it was just it always felt like way too difficult to get started with. Like I'd see my friends walk up with like suitcases of just Magic cards, and I'd be like, oh, okay, I'm never catching up.
It's a complex game, and it's a lot of money. And I started out with a lot of budget decks, to be honest.
Okay.
And if you look at my channel as well, I do make videos on budget stuff because I've been there as a player and have a passion for the free to play and budget friendly players. So you can actually find a lot of budget stuff on my channel as well.
Okay. So if that's the gaming in general, and kind of what started to draw you towards Terra and card games and draft modes in general, what would you say made you want to make the leap to do content creation? Because again, it's a lot of work. It's not something that you can just sit down and record a video and put it out and
tell me about it.
People help.
Yes, absolutely. So it's a really interesting story. So I mentioned that I went to college. I actually got a degree, bachelor's degree in religious cultural studies. I grew up around that, and aside from all the bad stuff that comes with it, there was a lot of good that it taught me, and I had a passion to kind of communicate the good sides of that really could help, make your life better. But after college, I really had a shift in my beliefs and my passions,
Mm-hmm.
and in I guess just kind of lost a passion to teach that full time with my life.
Okay.
So in this phase of trying to figure out what I'm going to do, I discovered Twitch and started watching, Magic the Gathering Arena, Hearthstone, everything card games. And I saw that, these people were able to interact with their viewers on like a live basis, answer questions, and build community around kind of this safe space. And I got the idea that, if I'm going to dedicate my life to something, I want it to be something that I'm passionate about, excited about. And so I started my channel around Magic the Gathering, and when Runeterra dropped and I started playing the game, like, it sounds really weird, but I feel like the game was made for me. Like, it was so perfect. Like, everything about the game was just so right. And my brain clicked with it. I just couldn't stop playing it. And even when I was making Magic the Gathering content, all I wanted to be doing was playing Legends of Runeterra. So really just an awesome thing. So it's kind of how I jumped into that. But I also knew that I didn't want to abandon that side of, speaking into people's lives and encouraging. So I said my channel has Rocket Card Games, Rocket Life. So eventually what I plan to do is upload videos about life lessons you can learn from card games, like how to not be tilted by life, and don't be results oriented in life, stuff like that. So started YouTube, fell in love with it, and couldn't imagine doing anything else now. So
No, I mean, that's a really kind of cool way to view it. I mean, a lot of people, especially whenever they get kind of drawn into these types of games, it's easy to get, a little bit sidetracked as to, your personality. You sit there and you start really judging people. You start getting a little tilted, start getting a little angry. I mean, I know for myself personally, whenever I got older, the tilt didn't hit as much, just because I said, I got a wife, I got kids, I got life. It's not worth getting upset about. But there's definitely lessons to be learned from it for sure. But so we sit there and we keep talking about draft, we keep talking about all that kind of stuff. When you're playing the collectible card games, it sounds like you prefer draft over ladder, like the expeditions, arena, and Hearthstone, things like that. What draws you there and why?
Excuse me. So yeah, don't get me wrong. I am a fan of competition. Like, I am competitive. Like I said, when I got dominated at my first pre-release event, I walked out of there thinking I have got to get good at this. And the ranked modes are a really good litmus test for how good and how competitive you are at a game. But I am just not the kind of person that can enjoy doing the same thing over and over and over again. it's one of the main reasons I don't play MMORPGs like Warcraft or whatever. It's because I feel like it's just you're sitting there, you're grinding, you're leveling up your dude, and it's not a new thing every single time. When it comes to draft modes, so I think those rank modes are really like an exercise in like repetition and just knowing how to do the one thing over really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
Draft modes, on the other hand, are an exercise in creativity, being novel, trying something new, and knowing that you're not going to play the same deck twice, and you're probably not going to play against the same deck twice. There's going to be some tech card that's really new that you weren't imagining playing around, but you have to think about every single card in the game. You go from what the 12 or 13 that you have three of in a deck to, okay, now they could literally have one of 200 cards based on whatever their classes are that they picked, and even in expeditions one of 300 something cards, because you can go into even more. So I love that it's a changing experience, and you have to figure out how to milk all of the value out of even the most vanilla weak creatures, and it's something that excites me. So yeah.
I mean, and that's kind of interesting that you say it that way, because when we had Casanova last week, he's very much a master player. His goal is to climb the ladder, get to one eventually. And the one thing he said that it's funny kind of hear you repeat on the opposite end is when we asked what kind of general advice he has for the everyday player to continue to grow and kind of move up the ladder. He said, pick a deck, play it, master it. Don't keep jumping between decks and jumping between decks. So it's kind of funny to hear you echo that sentiment on the other side of saying, hey, ladders mastering one thing, expeditions kind of being a jack of all trades, so to speak, of understanding how every card works and knowing what you need to go up against, where a card may be extremely weak on ladder, but in expedition it could have great value just because of the way the game mode runs.
Right, and Casanova is spot on about that. If you've tried to rank up anything and you've tried to switch around decks, you end up tanking so much. It's better to learn that one thing and keep going and learn your bad matchups and good matchups inside and out. And I honestly have so much respect for anyone and everyone that has that kind of discipline. I, however, just love that change of pace, and even you get to be creative and be like, you know what? I've never seen this card. How is this card going to perform? And I'll get into it later, but that actually happened to me today on another expedition run where I got value out of a card that was actually very low on my tier list. So
okay. I mean, that's definitely something that we need to sit there and think about. But one big question that kind of we've been talking about every week too is the idea of pay to win in card games, or how much money people have to dump in terms of real world dollars for Legends of Runeterra compared to, say, other card games or something like that. And when we talk about expeditions, because the money structure is a little bit different. So when you're climbing the ladder, you're buying wild cards, you're picking out the cards that you want to improve your deck. But in expedition, do you feel like you have really any kind of need to spend real world money? If so, how much? Or has this been primarily free to play for you?
Right. So at the risk of sounding very braggy, I have not had to drop a dime on expeditions. I got my initial token and just proceeded. And I think they dropped the initial 7-win thing from 3,500 down to 3,000. But all of my first runs were 7 wins. And then I think the first like 3 weeks. So you got 3 competitive ones per week. My first 9, I had 7 7-win runs and 2 6-win runs.
Mm-hmm.
So I have been able to, like, quote unquote, go infinite with all the rewards and the extra shards and stuff that you get. And I still have like 10,000 shards to spend, and I've even spent some of those just crafting champions. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that's refreshing for people to hear, is that if you're not good at ladder, you don't want to do the deck building or anything like that, that you can still do this and not play game, and you could you could be good. You can climb and
Yes.
do what you're saying. So it's nice hearing that kind of being echoed across multiple platforms. But one thing that we typically like to do to start off the show, apart from introduce the guest, obviously, is we like to kind of do a little bit of a highlight of our week, to sit there and say, hey, this is what we've been facing, this is what we've been doing. So, I mean, if you want, as our guest, how about we give you that first spot, and then we'll jump to myself and Kozer.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to. This week has been just an expedition nightmare for me. It's really funny. You have me on as the professional expedition guy, and I have just been getting bodied in expeditions all week. I mean, I say that, but like a lot of my expeditions have been ending in six wins, and you get to that last one, and I have just been making the dumbest play mistakes, and honestly coming against the craziest decks. Like I feel like people are just getting better than me at expeditions or something. It's really kind of funny. I've been getting messages from people who've seen my tier list or have been on Reddit and stuff, and they send me a message,
Mm-hmm.
hey, just want to let you know, using your tier list, got my first 7-win runs. And honestly, that's really cool to hear, because that's exactly what I wanted to put that out for. I wanted people to be able to reach their goals in the game. And excuse me, but it's just like people are getting better than me. The competition's getting a lot more fierce. But today I finally broke the 6-win curse with Braum Poros of
Okay.
everything that it could have been. I took the fluffed and tuft packs and forced Braum all the way to 7. And like I said, sometimes you just find cards that are completely underrated for you that get you there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was playing They Who Endure, which in most decks I don't really like. Keep my creatures alive. I don't like to trade them off, which means They Who Endure, it's a 6-mana 1/1 that gets bigger with Overwhelm, that gets bigger as your creatures die throughout the game. Well, I had all these little Poros that were just chumping things and dying left and right, and Braum was crying, but so were my opponents as I slammed these giant They Who Endure on them. So it was really fun. Broke that curse. But another thing that I tried to do this week was build Yasuo. Everyone wants
Okay.
to make Yasuo work in expeditions. They want to make him work everywhere. And I wanted to do it for a YouTube video, and I thought that it was going to be great. Katarina and Noxus is one of the best pairs for Yasuo because of the recall and the stuns. And just Katarina has recall built on her. And it just felt bad because on the games that you don't draw him, you literally cannot win. The creatures, the units are not able to support it. But when you do drop Yasuo, it's like you can't lose. And the only time I lost a game playing Yasuo was to someone else's Yasuo. So
Yeah, he's
it
kind of
was
a
a
struggle like that. That's the biggest problem with him. Is if you can get him down and all of the stuff in the right place, he's really strong. But it's really hard to get it rolling. And stun is, Gummy made a funny deck this week with Ash, removed Yasuo, and just made a free stun deck. And it was actually pretty nuts. It worked for a little while, but with the current meta, it's probably not going to be too strong. He might be able to go back and use it
yeah.
again in the future, but
Mm-hmm.
not right now.
Yeah,
Oh.
I mean, last week in the deck, or last week on the show too, I talked about a Yas expedition matchup I won against, and it was terrible. When Yas pops off in expeditions, it is the worst feeling in the world to be against.
Oh, it feels good to be on the side of
Oh,
playing
I'd
him.
imagine.
But
I'd
yeah.
imagine.
Terrible on the other side.
But so let's go, Kozer. How was your week, man? What have you been doing?
You really want to know?
I mean, I know, but I figured we can entertain the other people that
Hard
are
stuck
listening
in
to this.
plat 3 right now. At least I went up one.
I was saying last I heard you were 4, so 3's good. You're moving.
I played an hour-long mirror match of Karma versus Karma. They heal the
Yeah.
SI Ionia mix there. It's so cancer. I literally played it just because I was tired of losing to it with Harrowing and all that fun stuff. Ruination. Well, Ruination isn't the problem. Harrowing is
Yeah.
just an insanely strong card for the mana that it costs. Like, yeah, you could technically deny it and you can't counter deny it, but if you outsmart your enemy, honestly, you just throw it down. It's huge. That game was basically us playing card for card.
Yep.
basically. A couple of variations, but and then at the end I just held all of my runations and made sure my deck had more cards in it than his. It went down to I had 4 cards, he had 3 to pull.
Okay.
And every time he'd throw down Harrowing, I would Ruination, and then I made sure he wasted his 2 denies, and then I just threw down Harrowing, and then he just surrendered. There's nothing he was going to be able to do with it. Even if he Ruinationed, I'd still would have won the game, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I still find it so funny that, you know, you kept running into this deck and complaining about it and saying how terrible it is. And at least in Silver, which is where I was pretty much all last week, and we'll get into, you know, where I'm at now, I didn't see it once. Like, nobody was playing.
It didn't last for a long time. People started, I wouldn't say countering it. I think people just really, I know other people played the mirror match as well, and I think people just did not like the mirror match. The mirror match was so cancerous. It's anywhere between a 20 to 45-minute game or just whoever surrenders first. Like,
yeah, that's rough.
What kind of fucking game is that? Like, lifesteal in this game right now is a little strong, and
well, typically when you're playing this, you're not signing up for a 45-minute match. You know what I mean? It's you want something, you
8
know.
to 15 usually is what I want to play.
45 minutes is a bit much for a match. I mean, so like, I mean, it's at least on my end, you know, I haven't seen that, which is nice. So I'm hoping that that's out of meta. But I mean, and you know, so this week I was pretty hard stuck in Silver 1 for a long time. I mean, I'm going 1 for 1, back and forth, and it's literally, I'm watching this like that the XP like circle just hover right at that 50% mark, and I did eventually get into gold, which felt nice. But my favorite part of the week is, you know, the lesson that I feel like people have to remember is, in this game, never count yourself out no matter what you're doing. So the reason why I say that is 2 reasons, or came from the same game, but 2 reasons of that is, first, I'm playing a matchup, and it's Piltover's on a Noxus deck that I'm playing. It's a burn deck. It's TMO. I'm pretty sure most people are familiar with it. And, you know, it's getting to late game. I'm out of fuel. I had 13 health left on my Nexus. The enemy has 4, but my hand is empty, you know, except for 1 card. He still has a couple cards in his hand. So I've pretty much accepted it's near impossible for me to win this, because even though I have the more health now, you know, a turn, 2 turns max, he can burn through me, and I'm not going to have anything to go against him to get those 4 down. And so I play the spell that I have, which is a removal spell. He counters it, and so he had 13 damage on the board, which was enough to kill me, and he now has 15 damage on board. So it's one of those ones that I forget the name of it, but it's like deal 1 damage to a creature to give, you know, 2 other ones +1/+1. So he now has more than enough to kill me. So instead of attacking, you know, and just winning at that point, because I have nothing to counter, he sees I have an empty hand, what he does is he plays a Trifarian Assessor. And what that is it's a card that for every 5+ power ally you have on board, it allows you to draw a card. So at this point, including that card that he just played, he has 2 other +5s. He draws first card, 1 mushroom from team on it. He's down to 3 health. Next card, 2 more. He's down to 1 health. The third card you draw has 1 more mushroom on it, brings him to 0 health. So first, if you can win the game, just win the game. Stop playing cards. You know,
you don't need to finesse, man.
Yeah. I mean,
finessing.
I mean, I get that he wants to show how much better he is than me and put as much down on the board, but that cost him the game. And secondly, the thing that like I'm very guilty of is whenever I sit there and see, hey, you know, I can't win this. He has damage on board. I'm just going to surrender and hit the surrender button. Don't hit the surrender button, because you never know what stupid mistake your opponent's going to make. And I've won a couple games like that where, you know, I've put damage out and I'm like, okay, he has enough to, and they just forget a hit block for whatever reason, and it just lets the damage go through and wins the game. So don't hit surrender. You know, let your opponent, you know, actually play and outplay you. You know, if they're going to beat themselves, go for it. You know what I mean? But I mean, I definitely posted a clip on Twitter of it, and it was one of those things that I couldn't believe, because I had no right winning that game. So those are the ones that really stick with me.
Yeah, I had the the opposite moment. I was in an expedition. I was going for my 7th win, and
Okay.
I was dead on board. They full in attacked, but I wasn't gonna let them win their way. I progress day into like a billion mushrooms, and just ended it how I wanted to end it. You know.
But let's get into kind of the meat of the episode here is expedition. I mean, we've been talking about it again for the folks that aren't familiar with Krab. What you've put out a very in-depth guide for expedition through your eyes based upon region and card, and you've assigned values of like tiers for what every card is for every region and things like that. So what we'd like to do is have you kind of walk us through expedition, because again, Kozer, you're our favorite expedition host, right? Like you
No,
love expedition.
unfortunately, most of this conversation is mainly going to be you two, and I'm just going to kind of sit here, listen, and surrender every time I get a token just to get my champion. But yeah, maybe I'll learn something.
I mean, yeah. So we always laugh because Kozer loves ladder, and I love expedition.
Yeah.
I'm not great at expedition. I haven't gotten my 7th win. The most I can get is 6. Typically, I'm hovering around 4, 5, maybe. This week was terrible. I got a 3 and a 1 on trial. And so I wasn't too thrilled with that.
It happens.
I mean, I kept thinking, oh, it's going to be a great deck. And then, like, the more I started dropping, wait, this is...
Yeah.
So, I mean, before we kind of dive into the region-specific cards and cards that you think have value and we should be paying attention to, what kind of general tips or advice would you have for folks that are just looking to improve or really dig into expeditions for the first time?
Yeah, so this is something that I actually I struggled with a little bit when I initially made the tier list, because drafting in Runeterra is much different than drafting in other games. Other games, it's very, very randomized, and Runeterra is very, very synergy based. However, I really wanted to be able to capture something that could help newer players who have little experience with draft modes and synergy and stuff. Like, if you have the knowledge of what cards kind of work together, then you have to adjust the ratings a little bit. But I wanted a like vanilla test tier list. Like, if you were just looking at this card raw power level without anything else in mind, how would this card perform? So excuse me, a lot of them you'll see they could move up or down the list based on whether or not it has synergy with your deck. For instance, there is a card, Deathmark. I got so much hate on my rating for this card because in the right deck it is busted as junk. If you are like a dedicated Hecarim Zed ephemeral deck, that card can make, what the Dark Water Scourge or whatever it is. It's like a 5/5 life steal, whatever, for basically no mana. You can turn that into a real dude and just kill off whatever your opponent is playing that you want done. Like, in the right deck, it's busted. But if you can't figure out that synergy stuff, if you're newer to the whole drafting shenanigans, you can't just look at that card and be like, oh, that's awesome, and hope that it performs well in your deck. So what I wanted to do was make a tier list that had that raw power level taken into account. Just in most cases, this is going to perform very well across most decks. This is very synergy based. Yes, it can perform well, but you have to have the right deck for it. So there was a big challenge around making a tier list like that, and but there has been a lot of good conversation and a lot of good feedback from the community about how it was received, and a lot of people said, I agree with most of what's going on here. But so take the first tip advice that I have is take any tier list with a grain of salt. Like, know your own experiences, know what kind of decks you're good at drafting. What, like me, I am a terrible aggressive player. I had a deck that I thought was just the most brilliant Noxus aggro deck today that went 2 wins and just was done. But I thought it was great because I am not the best aggro player. I, however, am really good at mid-range and control, and I skew a lot of my grading and stuff to mid-range and control, which I think shines more in expeditions anyway. But here's the thing. When you are drafting an expeditions deck, the best advice is after you pick your first 2 champions, you really want to know, you want to stop and evaluate, what is my deck doing? Okay. For instance, if you are drafting one of my favorite archetypes, Anivia, Karma, Enlightenment. If you're drafting something like that, you can pass a lot of the elusive creatures. You can pass a lot of the the stuff from like a Zed tempo ephemeral deck that you would normally have in one of those. You can pass those for bounce effects, the ramp effects, those things that wouldn't perform well in a Zed deck perform really well in that. So you want to stop after your first thing and be like, okay, what is my deck doing? And then start to tweak your picks around the rest of the draft around those. So there's so many ways to build this. Like if you're an elusive deck, literally take every single one of those elusives that you see and try to close the game out as fast as possible. You're not worried about playing around too many things. You're just worried about how much damage can I get in before my opponent can start dropping units that are bigger than mine. That's really what you're worried about, because most often you can close the game out. Like something with Fiora. If you're playing her, you want her to survive, so take as many barriers and buffs along the draft as possible. Riposte, Prismatic Barrier, those like skyrocket to 4.5s in a Fiora deck because they are what's going to make your win con. And you play different based on your deck as well. Like if you're a late game bomb kind of deck, you're going to trade off creatures way more aggressively than in a mid-range deck that's really wanting to get value out of your creatures, because what you're trying to do in that late game deck is just get to your bomb and make sure that your life total's high enough for it to take over the game for you. So that is the general thing that you want to do, is evaluate after your first 2 picks, what is my deck doing? And then know, okay, these cards are going to be best in this. These cards are going to be best in that. And I really wanted to capture that on my tier list, but it's really, really hard in such a small space to say, okay, this one is rated here, but it performs better in a control deck. This one's rated here, but it performs better in an aggro deck. Kind of hard to capture all that. So I really tried to do my best to balance things as much as possible. So yeah, that's kind of the first major thing that you really want to know. Just know what your deck is doing. But another thing that's very important and can also, it really can like mess up how consistent your draft is you need to pay attention to your curve and your spell to unit ratio. I have gone through an expedition and drafted the best cards only to get to the end and realize I drafted 20 spells and 10 units and I just never made it on board. And those were some of the early days of Krab Koring on Legends of Runeterra, but I've started to pay a lot more attention to that. You can't I've gotten messages like, so I just look at the tier list and I pick the highest rated card for each pick. And I've had to answer back, well, yes, but no. You really want to pay attention to your mana curve. You want the bulk of them to be between 2 and 4. If you have a lot of 1 mana things, you're going to lose a lot of value. If you have a lot of things in the 7 to 10, 9 range, stuff like that, you're going to have really bulky hands that you can't play. So you want to have that balance in between there. And then people have asked about the spell unit ratio. I like to say about 2 to 3 times as many units as spells. Whether you have 24 to 28 units in a full 36 card deck for expeditions, you want to have 24 to 28 units and about 8 to 12 spells. And I think that's a pretty decent balance. So that's a good target range if people want to get started with just your average expedition deck.
Are you learning stuff, Smithel?
I actually am. It's amazing because I'm sitting here and I have this question. So now, whenever I used to try and again, this is the first draft type mode, and any of the card games that I've played in the past that I've kind of, fallen in love with. And one of the things that I've always struggled with is, let's say I don't have your tier list in front of me. When this comes to mobile, let's say, I'm in the car or something, I'm just trying to knock out a quick trial or knock out a round or something like that, or just even draft my deck. Are there certain things apart from the first two picks and then understanding, what your deck's going for? Let's say, I get 3 packs and they all look like they kind of fit into my deck. How do I determine which units are going to be more beneficial? Like when I did Hearthstone, for example, I always tried to look at value in a way of, I take the attack, I take the health, and I add it together, and it should at least be, I think it was like double what the card value was. So if it's like a 1 cost thing, you want something like 2, like a 2. If it's a 2 cost, you want 4. Does that similar rule still apply, or should we be focusing more on the health of the unit or the attack, or what would you say would be like the first look if you think everything else is held equal?
Right. Yeah. There is this thing that's called like the vanilla test that you're talking about.
Okay.
And on my tier list, everything that is very vanilla in that sense, that is, it meets the requirement for a decent stat line, is about excuse me, you want double the attack and health for whatever the mana cost is. Now, that changes a lot depending on your deck. For instance, there is what is it? Soul Gorger, right?
Yeah.
It is a 3/7. That does not meet vanilla test standards. You add those together, you're at 10. That's, double the 6 mana cost, to 12. You're not meeting that standard. However, you have lifesteal on it, and it's going to stabilize the game for you like crazy. That's the thing, is you have to kind of evaluate, and this is hard if you don't have the tier list in front of you. You have to evaluate how good is the ability on this card. Is it going to generally, like, or is the lower stat line going to be made up by the fact that this has a really good ability on it? For instance, what's another one that comes to mind for me? Like Ezreal. Okay, a 1/3 for 3 is terrible. I wouldn't play a 1/3 for 1. It's just it's disgusting. However, that he's going to give you mystic shots, and he's going to be elusive, stuff like that. You kind of just have to learn evaluation on each card. And what I like to do is, if you don't want to memorize everything, kind of take excuse me, a few from each region that okay, this is a decent unit, and I know that if this comes up, I'm going to take this every time. So highlight a couple of those in your mind, and know that when they come up, those are going to be very valuable units for you. It's easy to, instead of memorizing 318 or whatever it is cards in the whole game, memorize the, what is that, 24? If you multiply 4 by each region, boom, you've got 24 cards that you have to look forward to, and that you can build a pretty decent deck around them. So
that's one way I never thought of it. So when we're talking about regions too, and I know we're going to go into cards, is there, and I apologize, I don't think we vetted this question through you in advance, but I'm just thinking of it now, is there a region or regions that you feel in general are more geared towards expedition as opposed to ladder? Because the one that I seem to have the most luck with is Demacia, and I don't play that at all in ladder, but it feels to me like they have a lot of like
That's really good.
just real good chunky units. Like these ones are going to sit here and stick on board.
You hit the nail on the head. Demacia is hands down the most busted class for expeditions, for various reasons. Like I mentioned before, the expeditions itself tends to lean more toward a mid-range kind of gameplay. You don't really have all the tools within a draft to be super aggressive, and you don't always have the right things to get you to the late game. So you really are basing a lot of limited formats around that mid-range thing and trying to extract most of the value out of your creatures. And Demacia just has the best creatures. Their tough abilities, their challenger abilities, they're just very decently statted, and it has the best combat tricks of all of the classes as well, which
Judgment's huge.
Judgment is unreal. I had a game. It was a Heimer Lux deck, and I was at 1 life, just had no business winning the game. Top decked Judgment on my opponent's turn at 1 life left, wiped their board, dropped my turrets off of Heimerdinger, and literally they could not recover even though I was at 1 life. So yeah, Judgment's insane. But honest, it's the barrier spells. Riposte is unreal because not only is it a cheap barrier, it allows your smaller creatures to trade up for the bigger ones for like no commitment. So that I have that one rated super high just because of its ability to make your small things trade up for stuff that they have no business taking out.
So let's start with this as the first region then. You know, whenever we go, like I said, if it's good with you, let's go kind of through region by region and maybe you highlight the cards that you think. So we talk about Riposte, talk about Judgment, but like the champions, the followers. What else do you think makes up the heart of each of these regions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we can tackle each one of these, and I'll probably start with like the one champion that I really feel is the highlight for that region, and then I'll jump into some units, I guess, that I really look for each time because they shore up weaknesses of that class as a whole. When we start, if we're looking at Demacia, which I said is the best one, like obviously Garen is really good, and I have him rated higher than Fiora because he's good on his own. But the thing about Fiora is when she hits the board, it becomes an entirely new game. So she is like the go-to champion for Demacia. It stops becoming, okay, how can I do efficient trades on the board and get my opponent down to 0? Fiora becomes, okay, how can I not have 4 things die if my opponent plays it? Or how can I get 4 things to die? So I have her as kind of like the highest champion in there because you can get barriers and buffs pretty efficiently with Demacia, and just the fact that she warps the game is unreal. So if you can figure out how to navigate, like if you can learn to navigate a match with Fiora, maybe do some test runs in ranked or something first. But if you can figure out how to navigate a match with Fiora, you can dominate a ton of expedition matches. And I honestly, I had an expedition run where 6 out of my 7 wins, I had to face Fiora. And the only way I beat them was because I was running a Fiora deck as well.
See, it's interesting that you said it because I honestly have never picked Fiora in Expedition just because I have this fear in my mind that what if I don't get barriers? What if I don't get things to keep her alive or denies, like if I don't get Ione as a second unit, what's called region option? You know, so it almost scares me off of that. You know, do I want to waste a champion that is so dependent upon other cards and buffs and combos? You know, as opposed to, like you said, like a Garen, that I'm like, okay, I can put him on the board. He's a 5/5. You know, he's going to heal back up every turn. You know, at least I got a solid blocker here.
Absolutely.
You know, but I definitely she's been taunting me and calling me. We'll put it that way.
I would say the pushback against that is because she's in Demacia, you don't have to rely on Fiora the entirety of the game, really. Because all of your other units are going to back her up a lot. So she can become that primary game plan. But if not, you have a really solid plan B and how good your Demacia units are anyway.
Okay. So let's talk about these other Demacia.
Has a lot of stuff in it, like for the region in a whole, like for ranked and even norms and expeditions. There's like a lot of cards, like Lucian's seen a little bit more play right now in the ladder. Lux is getting a lot more play. And honestly, I just think in general, it's just getting more play. Like, Purify is like a very underrated 2-mana spell that just does so much to clear up a board. And I bet you anything it's super good in Expeditions as well, but I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
play him.
Yeah. No, Lucian's freaking insane. And there's actually there's another archetype in Expeditions. It's a Lucian Shadow. It's the packs that they come in are called Retribution, and you sacrifice your bunch of dudes. Works really well with Callista. I had one of my easiest 7-0s with Lucian. Just a busted card. But so Fiora, yeah, no, you're fine. Fiora is like the major champion, but like you're not going to see champions all the time. Like you really do have to depend on the other units in your deck, right? So the major weak point for Demacia is it doesn't have hard removal. So you're really weak to elusive pushes. You're weak to like major board clears, because if they've cleared your board, it's hard to get back in because you yourself don't have removal to clear their stuff. So if they've found a way to take care of your board, you really need some other ways to get back. So I like cards like Laurent Protege. It's the 2/4 challenger for 3. So this one like goes way above and beyond the vanilla test. So we said, you want those stats to equal 6, and if the mana cost is 3, the fact that it meets that requirement, it's got that big old butt on it to keep it alive, but it can just trade off it could just kill elusive units for days. I really love that card and take as many of them as possible because its Challenger effect is unreal. Challenger is a very, very strong mechanic in Expeditions because you can start, to dictate the game how you want it to be instead of how your opponent wants it to be. And then just my favorite card, I love this, is Radiant Guardian. The tough and lifesteal is just everything I want in a card. It stabilizes. It's hard to deal with. If you've been behind, your creature dies, you play it, and I've had the best week of, I don't know if you know the card Remembrance. It's a 6 mana. It summons a random 5 cost Demacia unit whenever you cast it, but it shrinks as creatures die on your turn. And whenever I play the card, I just, RNG hands, like, give me freaking Radiant Guardian off of this. And I have hit it so many times and I've just had a fun week with it. So one of my favorite, and we already mentioned earlier, the best spells for this are Riposte and Judgment, just because they're going to allow you to make trades and get back in a game that you literally had no business winning.
Awesome. So let's maybe kind of keep moving through your list here. So Freyord, what are we looking at here? This is typically whenever I'm picking a deck, apart from Demacia, it's Demacia and Freyord. Like I like that combo together. Again, the buff, tanky units, and I could kind of slow things down with Frostbite, so I like that.
Yeah, I love playing Freljord, hate playing against it. The Frostbite is just so annoying because you always have to think about it. It's one of the best combat trick mechanics in the game. And because it's all at burst speed, it's just so unreal good. But when I'm looking at Freljord, if you look at the top of the tier list there, I have Tryndamere as the highest. And I would say that was probably true before the meta started adapting. Freljord was honestly not played very much, but now there's a lot of Freljord running around, and Frostbite is Tryndamere's own worst enemy. Yeah. So you use the Freljord to defeat the Freljord, So I would probably maybe move him down to a 4.5 at this point. I'm kind of hesitant to move stuff around so easily, but Anivia is moving up for me. I am just like, when I played a lot of ranked and stuff during the preview patches, I slammed Anivia every chance I could get. I love the board clear. I love that she's so hard to deal with. Usually your opponent needs to spend 2, 3 or more cards to get rid of her just because she's so resilient and comes back. So I honestly move Anivia up my list in her ability to take over a game. It's just hard when you're not always guaranteed to reach Enlightenment. So but yeah, you play her, and if you keep her alive, it's game over. It's you stabilize. It's unreal. But to me, it's honestly really hard to rank all the rest of the units in Freljord because they're just the most efficiently statted units in the game. We talk about the vanilla test. Alpha Wildclaw is not only above vanilla, being a 7/6 for 6. It also has Overwhelm, which it has no business being that big and that
Yeah.
strong. It's just unreal. But Avaros and Hearthguard was probably the main winner in my Braum Poro deck today. Just I didn't need the Poro snacks or the Iceborne legacies that were pumping up all the other stuff in my deck. I just jammed like 3 or 4 Avaros and Hearthguards because I got lucky, and my deck was stacked. It's a 5/5
Yeah.
that beefs up your whole deck. That there's no comparison to the amount of stats that gives you as a 5/5 for 5. But if you're on like the big old Frostbite train, Rhyme Tusk Shaman is so fun. I love just locking down their creatures every turn. And kind of the underrated all-star of Freljord is Stalking Wolf,
Okay.
because like I said, Challenger is so powerful in this, but it has Challenger, but you're also having to think about the fact that you have a lot of Frostbites, so you can keep a lot of them alive and dictate the game how you want to.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Let's talk about another kind of one that we see on the, at least I see a lot, is Ionia. So you got the Minaj, you got things like that in there. So a lot of elusives. You got people that kind of just gravitate towards that because you see it a lot on ladder.
Right. The like I said, my favorite way to play Ionia is in the Enlightenment package with Anivia, but I think the real like super strong way to play Ionia in Expeditions is with your elusive units. And the reason I say this is because, in ranked, you're able to put the perfect answers in your deck based on the meta. But in Expeditions, you're trying to draft threats rather than answers. So whenever you're drafting a ton of elusives, you're making a board that is hard to deal with. So a lot of the removal options are going to be very limited for your opponent, and you can kind of go all in. So play your Navori Conspirators, your Shadow Assassins, your Life Blades, your Yasaris. Those are like my top tier ones if you're talking about units, just because they're very efficiently statted. The Navori Conspirator can get you a recall on your buff cards. The Shadow Assassin just draws you a card. Like, it is a 3-mana 2/2 unblockable that draws you a card. That's like top tier in any card game. But if I'll rewind a little bit and go back to since I talked about the elusives, that's the strongest way to play. The champion that supports that the best in the format, I believe, is Zed. Because he's just aggressive, tempo based, pushes extra damage. He's very weak to removal, but if they're targeting your Zed, then that means that your elusives are staying alive. So
that's one way to think of it. I didn't think of that.
Yeah, and it's just a really, really good way to push through the damage as a champion, keeps your curve really low. Because I think with Ionia, like I said, there's multiple ways to play it, but I think the most consistent way is to push your damage as early and often as possible with your elusive units. So yeah, that's really how I get most of my success with that region itself, and how I lose some of my games the fastest is against them.
Okay. So kind of continuing to move on here. So Noxus is, so typically anytime I see Noxus in ladder, it's very much an aggro-based type of deck. Is that something that's, in your opinion, mirrored in the Expedition Dust strategy? Or can you still play a slower-paced game, which Expeditions tend to be, with Noxus or decks that are like, I want to throw damage out quick.
Right. I have not. I have had one dedicated. Count it, one out of all my expeditions. I've had one successful dedicated Noxus aggro deck. It's not. It doesn't change. Noxus itself is very aggressive. You can, and I think there's basically like 2 real ways to play it. Spiders with Elise. And Darius, you really want as your champion for that to push through damage. The other way is I've paired it with Demacia to get a real like early damage push, and then if the game goes too long, I have those decent mid-range units to back it up, and then have ways to close out the game. Those are honestly the only ways I've successfully drafted Noxus. But if you look at it, if you have much experience in expeditions, you'll see that you don't face Noxus very much, because it is a hard one to draft, and a lot of their units don't block because they're so aggressively statted. It's a very, very challenging one. If you're very good at aggro, which I'm not, I think that Noxus has potential, but you really have to know how to play it and how to push the damage. And like Casanova was saying last week, you always have to ask, should I attack first or should I drop a unit? And that is the hardest thing to measure. And I think it's even heightened in expeditions because you don't have a lot of those other ways to close out a game.
Yeah. And so let me ask you this too, and maybe you'll have some answers. So I've heard, oh gosh, I think it was right whenever this entered into open beta, Swim put out a video in which he recommended in expeditions that a good strategy is sometimes to just pick from one region. So yeah. if you were to go Noxus, would you recommend to kind of take that strategy and say, look, just keep picking Noxus because you're going to get more Noxus cards to show, and then you can maybe try to build a hyper aggro deck? Or do you still think, maybe trying to split it up or trying to balance it out with maybe some more beefier units to make up for that weakness would be the way to go?
Right. So it's kind of hard. I think there are three solid ways to build the deck. If you can go mono Noxus and you can get the efficient, like you want the one drops. There's a lot of really decent statted one drops in the game. The thing is, if you're going mono Noxus, you have to ask yourself the question, literally every single pick of the game, which of these packs is going to average out to the most damage throughout the draft? Okay. And then each game, what play right now is going to average out to the most damage? So I had a mono Noxus deck that started out super strong today. And I went like 2-0 with it, just aggressive, and then got hard stopped. It has like that weakness of, if you don't get those early damage in, if your curve is not right, it is very weak to come back and close out a game. That's why and Frosty mentioned in the chat that Demacia or Ionia are the best ones to do monocolor. I would probably also add PNZ and Freljord as possibilities with that if you're a Frostbite package in Freljord and if you're a Shroom package in PNZ. But I think a better way to build Noxus is that one that I mentioned earlier, like early aggression with a mid-range backup with Demacia, or early aggression backed up by elusive closeouts with Ionia. Those are the two ways I've actually had the most success with Noxus. Outside of that, I just can't recommend it. I may get pushback on that, but I myself have just not had like the decent success with it.
What, you think the internet would give you pushback? Never.
Never.
No. Social media. People don't.
We've never made a mistake on this show.
No, I've had 100% agreement with my tier list and choices I've made for everything that I've done when it comes to card games.
Well, then let's get into the next one then, Piltover and Zon, because there's probably a lot of pushback in this one. I can only imagine.
Oh my gosh, Piltover and Zon is the most fun.
Yeah, because I feel like one out of every two decks, at least the ones I've been playing, are Piltover and Zon, just Teemo and Mushrooms, just every single time. Yeah. Like that's all I'm getting hit with, or just
the thing with Teemo, people love Teemo. He is, I think, an underrated champion and a highly misplayed champion. Teemo. And another thing I might get pushback on is not an early aggression card. He's just not. He is a late game finisher in a control deck that wants to allow its damage to be done by stalling out a game with mushrooms rather than pushing a bunch of early aggression and just sputtering out.
In expeditions, I agree with that. Sorry to interrupt, but
no,
in
absolutely.
ranked, 100%, Teemo is one of the strongest 1/1s, 1 mana, elusive units you can throw on the fucking board. He is a perfect unit to throw away. That's why he was created in Bagels and Gummy's burn deck that they made. That was why he was used. It was mainly a throwaway, and then his his puff caps. Hey, if he can get 15 in the deck, it might win you a game.
Right. Right. And I think someone like Mogwai, Mega Mogwai, if you're familiar with him,
Yeah.
he's of the same mindset that I am, that you don't want to, like, if you're a dedicated aggressive deck and you're using Teemo as just early chump damage, sure. If you really want to get value off of Teemo, like if you want your Teemo value, he's better in a control deck because one, the longer a game goes, the more damage your mushrooms are going to do. Two, the creatures themselves are not superficiently statted, so you want to rely on other like removal spells and life gain, like life steal kind of stuff. And honestly, I think the best way to build the Teemo deck is PNZ Shadow. I have had insane games with PNZ Shadow. In the heal is insane. The Ledros, if you can get access to Ledros, which one mushroom expedition I was running today, I drafted Hecarim as my first choice and then picked Shroom and Boom packs the rest of the time until I came across Ledros, picked that Ledros, Shroom and Boom the rest of the way, and just unreal sorts of damage that you can pressure that way.
Face palm right now. Sounds like pure cancer.
It feels like it. Yeah, it feels like it. But yeah, when we're talking about Piltover and Zond, as we've said, it is a very high synergy based class. It's very hard to draft because sometimes to get those synergy pieces that you need, you're taking a lot of just the garbage, like draft duds. Things that you really just wouldn't want to play because they don't have a lot of value on their own. There's a lot of really weak spells and a lot of really weak units in the set because most of them really pan out on a synergy based level. That being said, if I see Heimerdinger as my first champion, I'm windmill slamming him. I will never pass it. I honestly think Heimer's one of the strongest champions for expeditions because of his potential to come back into a game. I will say the first couple games are kind of weak because you're really you need the Heimer, but you can most often get one win out of expeditions, pick up your first Heimerdinger, and then your deck is pretty set from there.
Would you still, if you're getting the Heimer, would you still try to do that unit to spell ratio that you're looking at, or would you try to maybe swap it? That way you can really get the Heimer effect.
That definitely changes. Yeah. Depending on whatever unit you're drafting, like you kind of, I think that instead of doing a 3 times as much, 2 to 3 times as many spells to units or units to spells, you're looking more as a 50-50 ratio in that, because you still need units, otherwise you're going to get overrun. But I definitely value units or the spells a lot more, especially Flash of Brilliance, which is burst speed, gives you the 3/1 elusive turret and reloads your spell mana. If you're on Heimer, take as many of those ones as you can. As far as like just your units go, like if you want to draft PNZ, Chump Wump is your boy. He is so good. He's a 4/4 for 4, which automatically passes the vanilla test. But giving you 2 mushrooms, not only does it work really well for your Teemo decks, but it will give you discard fodder for a Jinx deck. If you're in Jinx deck, it will give you chump blockers in a Heimerdinger deck if you're like hurting for chump blocks. Those mushrooms have so much value off of that 4/4 body. You can discard them to things like Zonite Urchin. So you literally get a free card draw. It is just a very, very solid unit. But if we're honest, though, like we mentioned, you don't play Piltover and Zon for its units. You play it for its synergy and you play it for its spells. And when it comes to spells in this class, Mystic Shot is like Bay. It is so nice after the most recent update. You cannot you cannot overestimate how big the buff to Inspiring Mentor is, because not only Inspiring Mentor, but to Kinku Lifeblade, because now pretty much all the elusive units die to Mystic Shot. I had a 6 Mystic Shot deck today and never hated drawing it. It is just very efficient now. Thermogenic Beam is a huge spell. It is the most flexible spell, I think, in the game, because if someone plays a turn 1 Teemo, you can thermogenic beam it, and they give you the crying emote, or they drop their biggest thing later in the game and you just one-shot it with thermogenic beam, and it feels unreal. And that one pairs really well with Heimerdinger, because you can kind of say, well, I need a 3-mana elusive unit. Let me see if I could set this thermogenic beam to make that possible. Or I need to push overwhelm damage with a 6-1. You can try to get it 6. I just really love thermogenic beam as a spell. And although you don't see it all the time because it's an epic, I think the most overpowered spell in Piltover and Zon is going to be True Shot Barrage. 4 for 4 at Wendy's. Freaking Cozer. The True Shot Barrage is just unfreaking real. I've gotten so many 3-for-1s for that. You click 3, 2, 1, boom, watch the board go away. And if you're playing Heimer, you get a big old turret off of it.
That
and
gives you a nice little one.
Just it's a good time. So
awesome.
Piltover and Zon, hard to draft, hard to play, very rewarding when you get it right.
Awesome. So I think that finally just leaves us with Shadow Isles. And what are your thoughts there?
Shadow Isle is although I love the synergy of Piltover and Zon, I am a mono black player when it comes to Magic. I love graveyard shenanigans. I love just straight up hard removal spells, life gain, and that is everything Shadow Isles is. It is the best supporting class. It has efficient removal, it has card draw, it has life gain, it shores up any weakness of your deck. And the people have mentioned that Shadow Isle needs a complete rework because of how efficient it is, whether it's Expedition or Ranked. But it is by far, while Demacia is the best primary class, Shadow Isle will always be the best supporting class, regardless of what you've drafted first. And we all know Hecarim is dominating Ranked. Yes. It's no surprise to anyone. But honestly, he's not my favorite Expedition champion. I'm a Thresh boy through and through, because I've already mentioned. Yeah, I've mentioned that that Challenger is a very, very powerful effect in Expedition.
Yeah, it does work in Expedition well.
Yeah, he works so well, and then when you get him leveled up, he brings your other champion out for free on attack. So if you're playing Thresh Tryndamere, you're a happy camper, and you're probably winning that game. So honestly, although Hecarim is the most powerful on his own, I would venture to guess that Thresh is going to give you a lot more value over the course of Expedition, more than Hecarim would.
Well, now that I know that Thresh, when he levels up, that's what it does, because I never see Thresh, and I never play it. Yeah, I can see that being huge in Expedition, bringing out your champion for free, especially in Tryndamere.
Especially, if Tryndamere, Anivia, and they're not just coming out; they're coming out and attacking. Yeah. So it is you can just body your opponent out of nowhere.
Wait, so it turns it into a rally?
No, so, it just think of it like a what are the ghost kind of units? What starts with the knee? I'm blanking right now.
The ephemeral.
Ephemerals. Yeah, think of it like ephemeral with Hecarim. When a Hecarim attacks, he summons the 2 ephemerals. It's like that. You put out Thresh. Here comes another unit
on the board.
Along for the fun. Yeah,
exactly. But they aren't ephemeral, so they can stay around if your opponent has nothing to do with them. Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with them. So yeah, really, really love Thresh as a Expedition champion. And to back that up, I think the best unit is the Rekindler, because you can kind of, if you have a Rekindler in your deck, you can be a little more aggressive with your champions, knowing that I was just checking chat there, but yeah, the Rekindler not only can revive your champions that have died. If let's say you have 2 Thresh in your deck, right? One of them's already died. You play the other Thresh, you play Rekindler, you now have 2 Thresh on board. And it is just unreal value. I got dominated the other day with someone that played Demacia Shadow, and they revived their Garen literally 3 different times. I've like Garen's already hard to deal with, but they revived him 3 different times with the Rekindler, and there was done. There was nothing I could do, and I had a god tier deck, so it was rough. But Rekindler, I will take as many of them as possible in a Shadow archetype. But like I mentioned earlier, Soul Gorger is one of my favorites because it has all the same things that Radiant Guardian does: a big body, and it has lifesteal on it. So if you're kind of behind, dude, I had a deck I was winning, and they landed 1 Soul Gorger. It was game over. I was playing an aggressive deck, and they landed 1 Soul Gorger that I couldn't handle, and it was game over. It completely stabilized the game for them. So
Smithel sometimes goes bye-bye if he doesn't
click
his mouse. I think
no worries.
Goes to sleep.
No worries. All right. So yeah, I really like Soul Gorger in my Shadow decks. I usually like to run like one to 2 of them. And then Shadow Isle just has your best spells. All the hard removal. I will take all the Vengeance, all the Grasp of the Undying, and all of the Glimpse Beyond. You can literally kill any unit straight up. You can gain life on Grasp of the Undying. It's really good against the Fiora decks. And then Glimpse Beyond's also good against them too, because you can deny them the Fiora kill by killing your own unit and getting card draw. So I like to look for those 3 and take as many of them as possible. So I think we've kind of broken down to most of the premium units and spells that I look for in all my expeditions for each region.
Okay. Let me ask you this question then.
Yeah, absolutely. Shoot.
This is kind of on the exact opposite end. In your opinion, and if you have to take a second to think about it, that's fine. What is the worst card to draft for Expedition? You sit there and say Heimer, you're taking every time the second he pops up.
Yeah.
Is there a card that when you see it, no matter what pack it is in, you're like, not worth it in the pack?
As far as champions go, or any card,
whatever you want to think of it as.
Mobilize, probably.
Mobilize. Yeah, dude. I hate Mobilize.
Everything else can do something.
A god awful passion. It just.
So here, for people that don't know what that card is, that maybe are checking it in, can you explain what it is and why you hate it?
It literally is. It's like a 3 mana. I believe it's 3 mana, if I'm not mistaken. Just do nothing. It pumps the creatures in your hand for a moderate price, so you lose tempo by playing it. If you draw it late in the game with no units in hand, you're crying because the card is dead. And it doesn't impact the board in any way, shape, or form. And Expeditions is all about impacting the board. And I think I've passed a really good pack just because it had Mobilize in it, because I do not want to draw that card any way, shape, or form.
This card is so funny when you see this stuff in ranked. It's rarely used. I feel like some people just throw this in just for fun.
Yeah, it is. If you can. Right. If I have someone play Mobilize on me in an expedition and I lose to them, I will tweet that I'm done.
That's when you go back to Magic. You're like, message received.
Message received. So yeah, that's just one of those big grown test cards that if you lose to that, it feels so bad.
So here's the biggest question for you, Cozer, is after we've kind of covered anything, have we tempted you at least a little bit into the end?
Not even slightly.
Not even let me finish the sentence.
I'm not. No, I don't know. There's just something about. I just don't enjoy it. I don't know. I try every here and there. Now looking over this list, maybe next time I'll look at this. We talked about this. I did learn some stuff about it. There is a lot of stuff that I agree with. Yeah, maybe I'll get to round 2, but every time I get into it, I just get I lose the first one and then I just auto surrender. I'm like, fuck this shit. I don't even want to pick another card. This shit's horrible.
Oh, that's great.
So I guess have we covered everything that you think over your tier list?
I think all the main points, we really touched on. And as we I'm probably gonna tweak this thing little by little. It's like I want to be as close to like Riot's philosophy as possible. Tweak it very little because I want people to know that they have a consistent list that they can go back to. And I think I'm pretty spot on with most of those things, and giving people a general idea of how to play Expedition. So
yeah, and again, for everybody on the audio version and things like that, we'll mention at the end too, but we will have the link to his list and all of that kind of stuff in the show notes. So as he continues to update, the list in real time, I would strongly encourage you guys to bookmark it. Follow him on Twitter, whatever it takes to. That way whenever updates come out, and if you want to continue to get Expedition tips. So just keep an eye out below. If you're on YouTube, look for that. If you're on the audio version, again, go to our YouTube, go to our Twitter, and you'll be able to find it there.
Yeah,
but,
I'm going to be posting his every 2 weeks? No, 2 weeks. They might make slight changes to buff stuff in Expeditions and nerf stuff in Expeditions. So every time Krab does update stuff, I'm just going to add it into the YouTube description because it's not a big deal to just add a Reddit post or whatever, or his Twitter post, just with a link. I don't mind putting every link on YouTube, deck lists, everything, because when it's on YouTube, you can click it. I will not add everything in the audio version just because it messes up when you go to Spotify.
Looks a little rough.
It looks really bad. I did it for the first 2 episodes and never again. No, not doing that anymore. I just put our Discord or our YouTube. That's actually the link I've been putting lately, is just our YouTube. So, okay, so we're all done with this. Now let's get into the meta.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about meta. So typically we do a deck of the week, but we wanted to keep this relatively Expedition focused here tonight, especially because we went into the ladder so much last week. But one thing that we do want to kind of highlight is, again, being Mobalytic partners, we like to kind of keep on top of whatever they're doing, whatever they're putting out. And if you recall, last week we mentioned right before the patch came out, Swim released on Mobalytics what he thought the meta deck tier list was going to be for ladder climbing. And Casanova, Cozer, and myself, we kind of talked about what we expected. Since then, they have actually tweaked this list.
Oh, quite a bit.
Yeah, and so it's a little bit more in line with what we would expect to see. Again, we're not going to go through every single deck, but Cozer, if you just want to kind of maybe talk a little bit about what the S tier or maybe one of
I'm just gonna go over the S tier and Spooky Karma just because I fucking hate that deck. So Kinku elusive, same elusive stuff. You're basically just buffing Kinku using dropping your Omen, Jeweled Protector, putting it on it. That can literally win you the game. There's a lot of stuff in this deck that can really win you the game. This card is huge. When Fair Hatchling gives 2/2 to all of your units on the board. So if you can stack your board up and drop one of those, it can just shut down the game. Also, Kinku Wayfinder is huge because it brings out all of 2 1-cost units, and that can bring out your Omen Hawks or your Navori Blade Scout and just overload the board. Or use them as blockers. Sometimes I'll put them down because I know I have a chance to get 2 blockers. And the way it works is it uses Allegiance. So Allegiance, as long as the next card that you're going to pull from your deck is the Ionia, you'll pull an Omen Hawk or a Blade Scout from it. So it's this deck's really good. I've been using it a little bit to climb. It does have its stuff that it's good against and stuff that it's bad against. So just like Casa talked about last week, really focus on just trying to take one deck and grind with it. I've been doing that a lot lately, and it helps. I have been moving up a little bit more, but it's a big grind, especially once you get to gold plat. Everyone starts to have a little bit more of a brain and can understand what's going on and start thinking about, okay, this guy has SI. Does he have Harrowing? It's a possibility. I got to watch for his mana. Once you start playing against players that have that thought process, it's completely different. Because I've also made Smurf accounts and played in Bronze and Iron, and those kids literally forget to attack sometimes. Like they're new. Like they're new to the game. A lot of them. They're still trying to understand the mechanics of it. So another deck is Fearsome Rally. We went over this like 1,000 times. It's basically just Mistrace with Demacia now. Rally is huge. Lets you overload the board and then just attack again. Radiant Guardian is for that healing. That's like we talked about before. As long as one of your units die, you put that out. That's a 5/5 with toughness and lifesteal. Lifesteal is just really starting to come more and more into the meta. The Harrowing is this card is mildly busted. It being a 10 mana cost, it basically revives every high. How do I want to say that? Highest power character that has died.
The 6th highest power units.
Yeah,
that have died in the game.
yeah.
So it doesn't matter what side.
Doesn't matter which side.
Either
Either side.
Yeah,
so if you've played shit units, and the other guys played like 3 Heckrooms, you get 3 Heckrooms on the board. It brings them back all ephemeral. So, like, you got to play around that too, because you got to remember is after you play the Harrowing, your next turn you will have nothing on the board. So you really got to think about it. And then Heimer Control. I mean, this has been around for a while. It's a little bit of touch-ups, using some Shadow Assassins to draw you more cards. That's all Heimer's about, is just drawing cards, just being on top. Oh, Shadow Flare is there. I didn't notice that before. But Shadow Flare is kind of cool because it makes every attacking unit an ephemeral. So you can basically clear a whole enemy's board by using that. So.
Yeah, so again, it's as the weeks kind of keep progressing, we're gonna try to maybe dive into one or two of these decks that they're still meta next week in a lot more detail. But, obviously want to keep the show relatively short for you guys here. But one other big thing too, whenever we sit there and talk about Mobalytics, is the Mobalytics founder Dr. Uthgar. He actually just hit master rank this week, so that's kind of
that's huge.
A big deal. Then I know they were kind of celebrating over there. Moving on to tournament talk too. Cozer, I know there's one coming up. That I believe this one happened in the past as well too. So this is the second time they're running this tournament.
This is the third time. This is called Legends of Runeterra. It's run by MonokumaEsports. I talked about them before. They basically used to do tournaments. Well, I still think they do. They do it for TFT as well. They're just like little $100 tournaments and stuff, but they keep getting better and better. Like even the rules, like this one is going to be a 2-day tournament with multiple qualifying pools. The top 8 players that are left will be double elimination. So the way that the tournament works is it's 2-deck conquest. So you must win once with both decks, but both decks cannot use the same regions. Meaning, like an example is if you use Demacia Ionia Elusives, you can't run Freljord Ionia Elusives. So you can only use Ionia once. You can't use it twice. So that's why a couple weeks ago when we talked about it, when Gummy and Casa were in it in the finals, Casa was using a mono Mistrace and then a Fiora deck. So you got to mix it up. It does make it. It's going to be really fun to watch because I feel like there's even more people that are in it now. Like a lot more, pros, because there's no pro scene yet. So a lot more of the top master players are going to be in it. So it's going to be interesting to watch. They still need to add spectator mode so they can actually have casters, because I know if they do have casters, at least me, I don't know about Smithel, but I'll definitely want to be getting into that 100%. That's basically it. I'll add a link at the bottom. Just I'm a pro. If you're a pro, my heart frosty. So basically I'll add that at the bottom of the YouTube. If you're interested in joining, it's free. There is a prize pool if you win. I don't know exactly how much it is. It's usually about $100, and they split it 4 different ways from first to fourth. So good luck.
Before we jump into the viewer question, Krab, any thoughts on ladder, anything like that? I know it's not necessarily your forte.
Yeah.
Just want to give you the opportunity if you heard anything before kind of we move on, because I know you know there's big information in the viewer question that you want to talk about too. So
I'm like bronze level ranked player because I spend all my time on expeditions. So
yeah, that's fine.
Whereas I'm like iron level expedition player because I spend all my time in ladder. So it's like it's two different mixes.
It's a trade off, you know.
Yeah.
I'm just garbage in both, so I'm okay with that. But so all right, so viewer question of the week again for anybody that has a question for us that you'd like to cover on the podcast for any week. Submit it to us via Twitter, via YouTube comment, Twitch comment, anything. Basically, get a hold of us. If we like the question, we'll basically try to bring it on show, and Kozer and myself, and if we have a guest on that week, we'll make sure that we answer it there for you. So this week's question comes from Ryan. He basically asks, when choosing a region for expeditions or ladder, what do you look for to help you decide what to play? So, Krab, why don't we let you jump into this?
Yeah, this is, I've gotten this question a lot, and it's actually a really huge thing to consider. So if you're looking at this from an expedition standpoint, I think the first major thing that I really look for is how strong is this champion that I'm offered on my own? Because your first two picks are based around your champions, and your champions are going to carry a lot of your deck and your synergy. So I like to look for how strong are these ones on their own. If it's a Teemo deck, you know that it's going to require a lot of shroom, like mushroom enablers. If it's Jinx, you're going to have not only discard stuff, but ways to refill your hand to counteract that. And she's mostly going to be an aggressive deck. So, or something like Yasuo, we already talked about. He really needs that high concentration of stuns and recalls. Does the champion have a lot of card requirements that you may not get in the draft? If so, probably not a solid first pick. That's the first thing that I look for. And then there's on the converse side of that, what champions do stand really well on their own. The reasons that I have, Tryndamere, Anivia, Hecarim, Thresh, Darius, Garen, all of those rated so high is because they hold their own regardless of the kind of deck that you put them in. It can be mid-range, it can be control. You can just, they all are very solid closers, regardless of the kind of deck you're building, and they require little to no synergy other than that you play efficient spells and creatures, which is what expeditions is all about. So having an idea of, and you can I think anyone can really kind of evaluate it. Like, does this champion have synergy requirements? If not, or if it does, do I think I'm going to be able to reliably get those online? If not, is there another one here that's really, really solid and I know is going to perform well, regardless of what my next picks are? Some of those synergy ones are good second picks if you already know what your first pick is. So you kind of have to go back and forth on that a little bit. But another thing that I've just started working on, another thing that I'm really considering, and something I'm excited to share about with the listeners and people here today is what comes in the various packs. I think for most cases, people just ignore whether it says arachnophilia or Noxian Might or whatever. You just pick whatever cards and you don't care what the other things say. When it comes to your initial picks, those have a huge pool in this. And I think Kozer's bringing it up right now, but a streamer buddy and I that goes by the other Mo, if you like to watch live and you like expeditions, I would check him out because he is just really top tier in expeditions. And he and I have been mapping every single pack that we have drafted, and you can start to see the trends here. Ezreal doesn't come in every sort of Piltover and Zon pack. He is in two of them, I think. Death's Door and Cloning Factory.
Yeah.
Those are the only ones you're going to pick him in. But if you pick him in Cloning Factory first, you're going to have a very weak deck because I think overall Cloning Factory doesn't have a high synergy level or very strong statted stuff across it anyway. Also, you look at Teemo. I would never take Teemo in a total recall pack because you are so reliant on the Shroom and Boom stuff to make him go off that
Mhm.
if you take the total recall Teemo first, you're gonna have a mess of a draft with all of the total recall synergy picks. So I really do now start paying attention to what pack those initial champions are coming in. I won't like, I mean, I might take Anivia in Cloning Factory just because she's so strong, but I really like Anivia in the Enlightenment package as well as Karma in the Enlightenment package. It could just make you a really busted deck because all of those things synergize really well with each other. So that's another thing that I started looking at. So those, I think that link is going to be somewhere for players to access, but they can go in,
Yes,
see what
absolutely.
we've mapped out so far, and as you're starting your draft, you can look in and say, okay, I have Teemo, he's in Shroom and Boom, that's going to be really strong. Conversely, I have Ezreal here in Cloning Factory. I probably don't want that one. So you
Mhm.
can kind of weigh a lot of those things. Now, I will probably go in and rank how strong each and every one of these individual packs are. But that's going to be down the road once we fully have everything mapped out. Oh, I think it's a lot of the epics and stuff that are missing right now. Um, and then, so figuring out where the champions are seated in each pack is one thing. But then the other thing is which, just kind of knowing which ones which ones combine and pair well with each other anyway. Like we mentioned, Demacia is the most flexible class. It's the most solid first pick because it's going to pair well with anything. You know,
Mhm.
same with Shadow Isle because it's the best supporting region. If you get either of those first, you know that you're going to have a really solid thing. But if you're looking into something like Freljord, it's not the best first pick because it doesn't pair well with Noxus. It doesn't pair well with PNZ. And if you get like weak pick second, then your Freljord deck can really falter based on that. So I like to know which regions pair well together, which ones are just naturally strong. So like I say, like I like to have fun. If it's PNZ Heimer, I'm gonna pick PNZ Heimer first every time, just because
Mhm.
I'm a mad lad. But um, when it comes to if you're really trying to be competitive, stick with the ones that are going to be consistent regardless of whatever your second pick is, and that's going to be for the most part Demacia, Shadow Isle, and in some cases Ionia, because
Okay.
it's just powerful on its own.
Yeah, and I'll definitely be the first one to admit that I wasn't aware. Like when you sit there and said people don't pay
Yeah.
attention to pack names, I did not pay attention to pack names. Like I just assumed they were there to just give flavor based upon kind of what cards went out. Like, oh, here's some spiders, or something like that.
Right.
And so like you would know, like, okay, these are general synergy things, but I never realized that, oh, this pack's only gonna take, like, you'll only see this card in this pack. You know
Right.
what I mean? So like if you
Yeah.
want it, you grab it now and you take everything with it.
Exactly.
So I don't want to discredit your general tier list because I mean, as we talked about, there's tons of great information in there, but this I think is going to impact my game so much more. Just because, in general, like I said, I kind of get an idea of what a good unit is, but knowing what they can come from, which ones, like you said, like, hey, Timo could be in this pack or this pack, but this pack is generally weaker. To know, hey, pass on this pack. I want the
Right.
Timo, but I don't want him here. So let me
Exactly.
try to like think about that. So I know like that is huge, 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 huge,
And
huge.
I have a huge question
yeah,
because
shoot.
I don't ever play expeditions, but maybe I will just based off this. Because so when you say suit up, I'm trying to remember the expedition screen. Will it show Fiora and Tryndamere on the exact same screen, or will it just say Fiora suit up with
Right.
two other
So
cards with it?
right, yeah. So that's basically what's going to happen. So, but here's how it influences stuff later. Okay, so when you get to the first screen, right, it's going to say suit up on top, and if it is a Fiora pick, it's going to say, and it's if your first pick, it's going to be monocolored. So it's going
Okay,
to
so
have
it's gonna be Fiora, maybe a Chain Vest, and a Plucky Poro. It's
exactly.
random. Okay.
Exactly. It's not going to have, Fiora and then, an Avarosan thing. I don't remember what
like a
everything is tapped
Radiant
out.
Guardian or Redoubled Valor. Like, it's not guaranteed to
Exactly.
always have that. It's one of
Those,
those
exactly. Those
12 things, 13
combinations
things.
come later. So
Okay.
whenever you're on synergy pick number 9 and you're clearly Freljord Demacia, you're going to have a suit up pack that will have either of those in it, and it can be Radiant Guardian, Redoubled Valor in that one. The way that this plays out well later is when you start getting to your champion picks, because you're in suit up, you are more likely to get Tryndamere as your first champion pick off your first win, and you're more likely to get him again at your third champion pick. So you'll get Fiora.
Whoa! I don't even get to my third win. Relax over there.
It's a new world for you there, man.
Jeez,
Right.
I think I've gotten to fourth once.
That's awesome. So, but the rest of the world that doesn't rage concede after the first one, you're gonna get your first champion pick after your first win, and it's more likely to be Tryndamere with a suit up, or Fiora if you want to continue down that route, or like let's say you drafted suit up, and you picked Fiora the first thing, and then like Ashe was your second pick. You're probably gonna see. Because Ashe comes in Frozen Solid and only in Frozen Solid. If that's your picks, when you get to your first champion pick, you're probably going to see Fiora in Suit Up, Ashe in Frozen Solid, and Tryndamere in Suit Up again. So that initial pick really impacts how the rest of your draft is going to proceed. And it's honestly not just flavor. And I'm realizing how important it is to know these. And by knowing that, I have built
keep going with suit up is what you're saying? Like, could you go with Frozen Solid if you say you had a Tryndamere in suit up? Would you mix it up with Frozen Solid, or would you essentially just keep picking suit up if they're up?
So you're obviously going to have to pick two different ones. Well, that's not always the case. Eventually, your stuff like Frozen Solid is because it's only in that class. Like, you're not going to be able to pick Frozen Solid once on your first pick and then Frozen Solid again on your next pick. But I think there is the potential to pick Suit Up with Fiora and then Suit Up with Tryndamere. But really, the best way that I can explain this is you want to maximize your two color picks based on how strong that color combination is throughout the rest of the draft. So if you pick Suit Up first with Fiora, you're likely going to want to pick a Freljord next if they offer it, or pick an Ionia next, because then you'll be in the Shield Up tier, and you'll start getting a lot of those barriers from Ionia as well. So knowing what is in each color combination will allow you to draft a better deck. And I think the best way to use it with the tier list is, okay, which of these lists has the higher concentration of very valuable cards, and which of them has the higher concentration of really low tier cards? And that's what I felt about like the Cloning Factory with Freljord and P&Z, is that there's very little synergy and there's a lot of weak creatures in both of those. So just kind of balancing those out and using the color combinations here will overall get you to a stronger draft.
Okay. Well, this is awesome. Maybe I'll use this. Maybe I'll go more than one win.
Yeah, and the other Mo who put this together with me, we're going to be sharing this pretty widespread with the community very soon.
Oh, so don't put this on the YouTube?
No, you're totally welcome to. He shared it with his community, but like when it comes to like Reddit and like the really widespread, Twitter, all like where the things like tend to just blow up like crazy, like the tier list for whatever reason that did.
I mean, because it's awesome.
Honestly,
if I played Expeditions, it is great. I just don't play it.
Right.
Like Gummy's going to be coming up with a tier list, and I know there's a couple of other top master players that are going to be making champion tier lists. But at the same point, it's like all these decks and stuff, they all have different tiers, and it really depends on what you're playing against. There's so many viable win conditions in this game that it does make the ladder a little less linear, and
Right.
sometimes you'll play one deck and it does good against like 4 other decks, and then there's the one deck that everyone else is playing that completely counters the shit out of yours. So
And
meta's always going to shift in this game. It's nice
that's
like
what
that.
that's what overwhelmed me when I was listening to your conversation with Casanova. Is like, yeah, this deck was good today, or is good yesterday, really bad today because now people are teching against this, and then
Well, exactly.
everyone playing that, and now everyone's teching against that, and it's not like other games where there's that one deck that is so
Mm-hmm.
powerful.
Oh, of
Like there's
course.
so many that
Yeah.
it's literally you just have to be on top of what is shifting every single day, and that's really cool. Um,
It's
so
like
that's
adding harrowing into decks right now. That's what a lot of people are doing. Doesn't even matter what the fuck they're playing on SI. They could be playing like fucking spiders. They just throw a harrowing in there.
right.
Like,
Good card.
yeah.
So let's do this thing, because so we got the expedition. So KrabKore basically explained, when he's looking for regions to choose, highlighting expedition pretty much. You being the other end of the spectrum here, when you're trying to pick what deck to play on ladder, are you looking straight at meta list? Are you looking at what you like to play? What are you
Well,
doing?
I do like I'm not really the card crafter guy. That's probably a lot of the reason why I really suck at Expedition too. Like I don't really theory craft too many decks. I'll take someone else's deck, change one or two things. It's not like I take credit for it or anything. Like shit, I just changed one or two things. Just there's certain cards that I really like that I'll throw in, like Atrocity sometimes. I'll throw that
Mm-hmm.
in other SI decks because some people don't have it in, but I think it's a really good card and it's won me multiple games. So basically, when I'm picking regions, though, or what I'm going to play, I kind of look at what I've been facing. If I keep getting steamrolled, like that's why I played that Karma game. Karma versus Karma. That mirror match was because I kept playing against it and I was fucking tired of it. So I just pulled up the exact same deck and then had an hour long match. And then I'm sure that I'm not the only one out of us two that stopped playing that deck after that. I
Mm-hmm.
guarantee you the other guy stopped playing that deck too. An hour game. I was waiting for it to upload on Mobalytics. I think
Yeah, I
Krab's
mean,
dog is barking.
Oh yeah.
Or
we, we all got that, but yeah, I mean,
how
and
do
I think
you pick Smithel?
yeah. See, so I'm very much different, and you heard me this week, Kozer, because typically you're the one I'm going to whenever I'm getting stuck on something,
Oh fuck.
and I view it differently. So like if I'm in expedition, since I kind of play both, if I'm on expedition, I'm kind of doing like what you said before, Krab, of the vanilla test is I'm saying, okay, which units that I'm seeing are in my mind the most valuable. It's not necessarily right, because as I've learned a lot today, but that's the way I kind of approach expeditions. I look at it more as a unit, and then which regions I generally feel have the best stick to board. So like the Demacia, things like that. When I'm doing ladder, though, it's I kind of change because whenever I'm climbing ladder, if I'm on the verge of something, like I was this week where I'm silver 1 and trying to get into gold, I'm picking a deck and I am just, plowing through with it. I'm saying I need a Masters, I need to get to gold. But then when I get to those areas that are more safe and saying, like, okay, I can't drop below gold now that I'm in here, I start playing what's fun. I sit there and say, okay, what's my playstyle? What's fun? And what in the meta fits this? And I try to really embrace that as much as I can. And then when I start getting towards like, okay, I'm getting ready to climb, I'll shift back over into kind of what's hot, what's meta, and something that'll really drive me through with a higher than 50% win rate. So like I'll look at this, I'll go into Mobalytics, I'll say, okay, I got a 60% running this deck when I was having fun. I'm going to pick this and I'm going to go ahead and run it and get into the next tier or get into the next like benchmark. So it's kind of a mix. I'm definitely more of a for fun type player. Like I know I'm never going to be master, so I'm not going to sweat it too much. But
Hey, never
when
say
I
never.
but when I get to those benchmark points, I do try to take it a little more seriously. But since we're definitely starting to close in here on a little bit of
Yeah,
time,
for sure.
let me just once again, Krab, sit there and say like, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, this is a huge thing to be able to talk about this because again, Kozer and I, neither of us are experts in this. So having somebody to kind of coach us through and hopefully coach the people that are listening to it, even all the way in Australia, which is we have a weird number of downloads there for some reason.
Nice.
Apparently we're big in Australia, but like so it's kind of nice to have people being able to listen to that aspect of the game that definitely we're lacking on knowledge on. And I definitely hope that as they release new regions and things like that, maybe you'll consider coming back on, updating us as to what's changed, what the new region has impacted and all that kind of stuff, because I'm sure people would love to hear more from you and see what you're working on. But to speak of that too, if people are looking to follow you, apart from us putting the links in the comments on YouTube and such, where can they go to? What's your social media? What can people do to basically keep up with what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, yeah, thank you guys for having me on here. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully people have learned something or could take something away valuable from the little that I've learned through expeditions. But yeah, if people want to find me, I am on Twitter at KrabKore. That's with K, so KrabKore, and I don't really stream very often, but I do. I am on Twitch sometimes for rare occasions at Twitch TV/KrabKore. The where you're going to find the bulk of my stuff is on YouTube, YouTube/KrabKore, and I do a lot of videos on how to draft for 7 wins, how to draft and play for 7 wins. So I will walk you through the draft. I will show you some of the key games and how I switch cards in and out, what I value for building a deck along the way, so that you two can see for each region. Like I want people to be able to come into YouTube and Google 7-win Demacia Freljord and kind of see how that draft gets navigated to get to 7 wins. So that's mostly where I'm at. And then if they want to, if you're on Reddit at all, you can kind of search up KrabKore and see a lot of the posts around the tier list. And there's a lot of good conversation in the comments around that as well. So those are the main places to find me.
Awesome. Cozer, yourself, for everybody that hasn't followed you yet.
On Twitter, Cozer88, and on Twitch, twitch.tv/Cozer_88, and YouTube is YTCozer88. I'm thinking about actually uploading a little bit more to YouTube. Who knows? Maybe I don't always like to stream my games because I get pretty frustrated, but maybe I'll make some rage tages or something and just record myself, because yesterday I kind of threw my headset and got really pissed. It's either that or my girlfriend's gonna walk out on me one of these days. So yeah, so you might see me more.
Awesome. If anybody's looking to follow me, Twitter, as always, it is at Smithel Gaming. Twitch.tv/Smithel. I will be trying to stream a little bit more frequently as well, especially with some Mobalytic partners. So let me lead into that too. Is again, if anybody is currently looking for ways to improve their game, based on their personal statistics in, Legends of Runeterra, League of Legends, TFT, strongly encourage you guys to go check out Mobalytics. You can actually look at your stats. Their premium membership is actually relatively reasonably priced, and I think they run a sale on it every so often too, so keep an eye out for it there. But it is well worth the money, especially if you're a league player, because the stats and the videos and everything that those guys are putting out is absolutely amazing. If you enjoyed this episode and you guys want to continue to help following us and help us grow, search for us on YouTube, subscribe there. Search for the Weakly Poro Report. You can find us on iTunes as well. You can also keep up with all of our Legends of Runeterra content by following us on Twitter. The Twitter account is at Poro Weakly. That's weekly with an A, WEAKLY. You can also watch the live show like you did today. Frosty HS did. He was in chat keeping us entertained here today too. So shout out to him and all of our followers there. We do like to stream the show live now, the day before we post the audio and video versions on YouTube and Spotify and things like that. So if you want a little bit of a sneak peek before it goes live for everybody else, the recorded versions, that is the way to do it. And you will know when we're going live. We typically do it on Wednesdays or Thursdays, but Twitter will definitely let you know at least the day of what we're planning on doing. But other than that, KrabKore, Cozer, thanks you guys for sticking with me here tonight. And we can't wait to see you guys next week.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you guys for having me on here.
No problem, buddy.
Have a great night, guys.
Well, take it easy.